He kicked me while I was pregnant right there on a marble floor that probably cost more than my entire apartment, and the room went silent, the way rooms do when money thinks it can get away with anything. I didn't scream, didn't swing back. I just pressed my hand over my belly and stood up slow because sometimes the quiet thing is the strongest thing you can do. I looked him in the eye and said, "My husband is coming." His name was Logan Ashford, heir to a line of hotels and shopping centers and glass towers that throw shade over people like me and his friends. We're filming grinning like this was premium content with bottle service. White towels scattered like a snowstorm on black stone waiters froze with that look that says help, but also says I need to keep my job. And I turned and walked to the back to breathe, to keep the baby calm, to keep my pride from making a mess I couldn't clean up. If it were you, what would you have done? Would you have made a scene and given them a show? Or would you have done what I did, hold your stomach and your anger at the same time and save the heavy breathing for later? By midnight, the video was everywhere. You know, the kind, vertical, shaky, cropped too tight, strangers narrating over my body like it was theirs to caption. Pregnant waitress kicked by millionaire's son, the text screamed, and my phone started buzzing like a hive that didn't care if I was tired, and the city felt heavy, like even the air knew I was walking into a storm. Across town in a penthouse with a view big enough to make the poor feel smaller. Logan's father woke to a stock ticker bleeding, contracts evaporating before breakfast, protest signs blooming outside a lobby that had never seen cardboard unless it was wrapped around a luxury shipment. He yelled at his son in a voice money can't soften, numbers flying between them like hard rain, 50 million lost overnight, 40 years of reputation on fire. And Logan just shrugged, like apologies, grow on trees if your gardener knows the right soil. Do you think that's fair? That one kick can cost a family more than most people will ever see, while some folks lose everything and don't even get a headline. The next morning, I put on my uniform anyway, because rent does not care about outrage cycles, and kindness does not pay for prenatal vitamins. In a small office behind the restaurant, I met attorney Salvatierra Gray, suit, gray eyes, voice like sand smoothing wood. The kind of man who looks at you and you feel seen without being judged. He said we could sue, we could set a number so high, the elevators would shudder. We could keep them in court until their last PR intern gave up. But then he asked what I really wanted, not what I wanted to win, what I wanted to change. That question opened a door inside me I didn't know was there. Here's the choice I made, and you can call me naive if you want. I can take it. We would demand something money can't fake. Not a press conference with flowers, not a donation to a charity, with a name that looks good on invitations. Logan would work 2 months at St. Raphael Community Hospital in the maternity ward, where life shows up uninvited, and bills show up right after, no privileges, no excuses, no last name that opens doors. And it wouldn't end on a calendar date. It would end when my baby was born, because remorse on a schedule is not the same thing as change with a heartbeat. They accepted, not out of goodness, out of panic, but a yes is still a yes. First day, Logan pulled his new BMW into the doctor's lot, and security turned him around with the kind of smile that says, "I have seen every trick in this city." Head nurse Martha handed him a faded green uniform that smelled like bleach and long nights, and she said, "There are no last names here. There is only work. Floors, sheets, food trays, sharps, bins, trash runs, whispered instructions at 3 a.m. Mothers moaning through contractions while machines beep in a language you only learn by staying. He tried the old lines, "Do you know who I am?" and the interns looked through him like glass. Because in a hospital there's a rhythm that doesn't care how many floors your father owns. It cares whether you wash your hands and whether you notice when somebody needs water. By the end of the week, he had blisters where champagne flutes used to sit. His back hurt from bending over beds that weren't memory foam. His phone stayed in a locker while the world outside kept spinning without him. He went home smelling like antiseptic and humility, which is a better cologne than it sounds, and came back anyway. Pattern interrupt. He didn't quit. I saw him for the first time since the restaurant on my third checkup, 8 months, and carrying low-spine complaining shoes, forgiving. I wasn't there for a scene, I was there to see if our child had turned. We passed in the hall, and his eyes held something I didn't expect, not anger, not arrogance, a kind of confusion that looks a lot like shame when you stop pretending. I nodded nothing more. Later, a fresh box of gloves showed up at his station without a note, and he wore them, and his hands stopped cracking. And somebody might say it was nothing but small mercies are how you learn to walk again when the ground has shifted. Week 3, a girl named Andrea came in alone, barely 18, contractions eating the distance between her breaths, fear so loud you could hear it before she spoke. Dr. Ramirez, all bark and burned-out edges, said, "If you can't pay, you have to go to county. We don't do charity here." And Logan stepped forward like someone had been rehearsing him in his sleep and said, "I'll cover it." Not his father's fund, not a vague promise, his card, his call to billing his name written next to a number that meant he would feel it. He stayed, he breathed with her, he counted. He held a cup to her lips when she was too tired to hold it herself. He cracked bad jokes and learned that sometimes bad jokes are medicine when pain is louder than dignity. When baby Andrew finally cried, Logan's face did this thing I can only describe as cracking open to light. You ever see someone realize life isn't a show, it's a hand you hold when the clock says 2:17 a.m. and there's nobody else to hold it? You know what I mean. He started changing in small ways you could touch. Nurses stopped rolling their eyes when he walked up. Doctors started trusting him to get blood to the lab without disappearing. He learned to move in a room like he wasn't the most important person in it. He still messed up, he still tried shortcuts. And when Martha called him on it, he took the correction, didn't turn red, didn't storm out, just did the thing right, and came back to ask what else needed doing. Meanwhile, the world outside calmed down because news cycles do what they do, and the money started creaking back like a door that never really locked. But something older than contracts was moving too, something under the foundation, with a family name carved in it. Twist time. And I need you to stay with me here. We asked Richard, the father, to meet at his office 60 floors up, glass on 3 sides, a table that could host a truce or a war depending on the tone. Attorney Salvatierra opened a leather folder and laid out photographs. A man in uniform, gray eyes like Richard's, but softer shoulders, squared, smile like he knew things he couldn't say. Matthew Ashford. Richard's older brother, the one they told the world had died on a mission a long time ago. He didn't die. He lived, he served, he came home last year and married me. I am Lucy Harper Ashford, and what happened at that restaurant wasn't a stunt I wanted. It was an accident that revealed a truth we needed. We were testing whether the Ashford family had any tenderness left under the polish, any room in their house for a word like dignity when it wasn't wearing a suit. You can be mad at me for that. I'll take it. But listen, Matthew had watched his brother fire a housekeeper named Maria after 20 years because illness is inconvenient. He'd watched the family treat staff like furniture, and he wasn't going to bring a baby into that without proof something could change. He asked me to take the job at the Golden Pearl for a few weeks to see how they spoke to those who served them, to learn if there was any door left in that stone wall. I didn't expect a kick on a marble floor, but sometimes the ugliest thing is the truest mirror. Richard went pale as those towels when he saw those photos. The room got quiet the way rooms do when history walks in. And then the door opened, and Matthew stood there, not yelling, not threatening, just looking at his brother like a man holding a photograph of two boys who didn't know how they would break each other later. They talked like only brothers talk when the performance is over. Matthew said he had eyes at the hospital not to trap Logan, but to see if the boy could be someone else when it counted. He said, "Give me a reason to believe the name we carry can be said out loud without shame." He said, "When our baby comes, Logan will stand in that room and watch the life he endangered arrive anyway, and then we'll decide what family means." If it were you, would you have set that condition? Would you have trusted a moment like that to tell you what years of press releases can't? 2 nights later, my back seized, and I knew that deep knowing only people who have done this understand its time. The world narrowed to breath and light, Matthew's jaw set in a way I'd seen before when he was calm under pressure, the city lights blurring into streaks as we drove. Dr. Chen checked me, and her face changed breach fast. "We're going to surgery," and I squeezed Matthew's fingers and felt a tremor a soldier doesn't show unless the stakes are holy. Logan was finishing his shift. He heard the code in the hallway. He saw Matthew running and said, "Uncle," without thinking. Then he sat in a plastic chair, with the posture of a man who finally understands presence might be the only offering that matters. Time lied to us the way it always does. In hospitals, it crawled and sprinted, it froze, and then suddenly broke open. And then a cry cut through tile and paint, like a trumpet in a quiet church. A boy, healthy 10 fingers, 10 toes, lungs with opinions, and the room tilted into a softness I haven't found a word for yet. We named him Gabriel because we believe in protection even when we don't say the prayers out loud. They placed him on my chest, and the world zoomed in, and when I looked up, I saw Logan standing in the doorway, like a shadow that wanted to step into the light but didn't know the steps. I said, "Do you want to hold him?" And he shook his head, because shame weighs more than most people think. And I said, "I want you to feel the weight of what you almost broke." And he stepped forward, because sometimes the right invitation can pull a person over a line they thought was a wall. His face. I wish I could show you his face. Not a movie cry with music swelling, a human unraveling you can feel in your own throat, eyes filling the way truth fills a room when nobody is pretending anymore. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Not the kind of sorry you say to get your keys back. The kind that costs you, the kind that changes how you walk for a long time." Matthew put a hand on his nephew's shoulder and said, "Now we begin." And I believed him. 5 years sounds short until you spend it doing the right thing over and over when nobody is filming. The Ashford Garden used to be marble statues and grass nobody could touch. Now it's swings and orange trees and neighborhood kids being loud without getting shushed because joy doesn't stain stone. Richard stepped down, set up a foundation that pays for childcare and clinics and job training that doesn't feel like punishment. And he sits on a dock teaching my son to fish with the kind of patience he never had for employees. Victoria, the little sister with a sharp tongue, runs a shelter for pregnant women who need more than platitudes, and she is good at it in a way that surprised all of us and shouldn't have. Logan, the boy who kicked me, is a neonatal nurse and the volunteer coordinator who walks other rich kids into the ward and teaches them how to hold a premature hand without squeezing, how to listen for the quiet cry that means fear, how to clean a floor like it matters because it does. You might be thinking, okay, neat arc cue, the credits, lesson learned. And I get that. We like tidy endings because our days aren't tidy. But real life isn't a montage. It's a series of choices you have to keep making, even when nobody claps. I still get messages from people who think I let them off easy, who say I should have sued until the checks bled, who say prison is the only language men like that understand. I also get messages from women who say seeing Logan in Scrubs changed a thing in their chest, who say they watched a boy become a man in a place where the only status symbol is how gently you touch a newborn's foot. Do you think that's fair? That he got a chance because there were cameras and outrage while other women go home with bruises and no hashtags, while other men don't meet a nurse like Martha who will teach them how to be useful. Here's a small thing that feels big to me. Last week, Logan was at a red light and saw a young woman walking like every step was a negotiation, one hand on her lower back, the other on a street sign because the world was tilting. He pulled over, said, "Do you need St. Raphael? I work there, I can take you." And she hesitated because we teach women to hesitate. And then she got in because there's a tone people use when they mean it. And he had that tone. He checked her in, got her a blanket, hunted down a nurse who owed him a favor. And when he came back to his car, there was a note tucked under his wiper, "Thank you for proving angels still exist." And he stuck it in his wallet behind a photo of him, holding Gabriel 5 minutes old, because paper reminders help when the day gets loud. So is this a happy ending or a provocation? Maybe both. We didn't fix the world. We didn't even fix our whole family. We just made a center that holds. When the rest shakes a garden, where kids can be loud, a hospital hallway, where a rich boy learned to be quiet and carry a tray without dropping it. But zoom the frame out, and the questions get harder, and I won't hide from them. If there hadn't been cameras, would anyone have cared? If he had been poor and I had been poorer, would there have been a lawyer with a leather folder? Or would there have been a shrug and a long wait at county with a wristband that scratches? Do you believe in transformative justice, the kind that asks a person to show up until they change, or do you think that's a story we tell so powerful people can sleep at night? Say it even if it makes people mad, because comments shouldn't just be clapping hands and heart emojis. They should be arguments that sharpen us. Here's my truth, and you can push back. I don't regret choosing work over war. I don't regret asking for service instead of a settlement. Because I have watched babies breathe. Because a boy learned to be a man in a building with terrible coffee and excellent nurses, and I have watched my son run under orange trees someone once told him not to touch, and I have watched a grandfather who used to count money, count minnows in a bucket, with more joy than I thought he had left. But I also know there are women watching this right now who never got an apology, who never got a courtroom or a hospital shift or a foundation check, and that makes me angry in a way prayer has to wrestle with. We owe them more than inspiration. We owe them policy budgets, clinics that don't turn you away if your card declines. Judges who understand that dignity isn't a luxury item. Stick around, because what happens next depends on you as much as it does on me. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what justice looks like where you live. Tell me if you think people can change for real, or if they just learn better ways to look good. If it were your sister, your daughter, your wife on that floor, what would you have demanded? What would you have forgiven? What would you have never let go? Share this with someone who needs proof that falling down doesn't have to be the end, and with someone who needs to hear that getting back up doesn't erase what you did. It just means you're willing to carry the weight for as long as it takes. Subscribe if you believe in redemption with a backbone and compassion that gets its hands dirty in love, that shows up at 2 a.m. with a clean pair of gloves and stays until morning. And drop your story below your agreement, your pushback, your anger, your grace, because this isn't just my life. It's a conversation we're building, one honest comment at a time.